Translation: by development of the desire of the great sages to know, the ears, the power of hearing, the controlling deity of hearing, and the objects of hearing became manifested. The great sages desired to hear about the self. So, purport by Srila Prabhupada. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, by advancement of knowledge, one should try to know about the Supreme Lord, the summum bonum of everything. As far as I know, that verse is from the 13th chapter, Adhyatma Jnana Nityatvam Tattva Jnanartha Darshanam. The purpose of knowledge is to understand the absolute truth. So knowledge does not mean knowledge only of the laws of nature or physical knowledge, which are working by the direction of the Lord. The scientists are eager to hear about the physical laws working in material nature. They are eager to hear through the medium of radio and television about things taking place far away from them on other planets. But they should know that the power of hearing and the instruments for hearing are given to them by the Lord for hearing about the self or about the Lord. Unfortunately, the power of hearing is misused in hearing the vibrations of mundane affairs. The great sages were interested in hearing about the Lord through Vedic knowledge and nothing more. That is the beginning of oral reception of knowledge. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militangena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Bodha Yamanasya Rishivir Atmanastad Jigrikshataha Karnaucha Niravidyetang Disha Shotram Gunagraha. By development of the desire of the great sages to know, the ears, the power of hearing, the controlling deity of hearing, and the objects of hearing became manifested. The great sages desired to hear about the self. So, Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur points out that this chapter began with Shukadev Goswami pointing out the difference between the Jiva and the Lord by reference to the Bhagavat Purana being a Mahapurana. Just like there's the 10 subject matters that are classified in the Bhagavatam. So it begins with, for instance, Sarga, Visarga, Sthanam, the creation, the secondary creation, the position of the planetary systems. This is to give at least an understanding of how great the Lord is, how small and how dependent we are, because after all, that's the beginning of real spiritual practice. Just like in Bhagavad Gita in the 10th chapter, the 4 nutshell verses, the first nutshell verse is Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo Mata Sarvang Vavartate. One who understands my position as being the source of everything, he worships me with determination. So this is established, and therefore, in that way, bhakti is hinted, as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out. And then he points out that in the last verse of the previous chapter, Shukadev Goswami has promised to explain the creation of the Lord by way of the universal form, which was one of the questions that Maharaj Parikshit asked in the previous chapter, in chapter 8. So now the Bhagavatam is just about to begin. So in this verse, it's a continuation of the description of the Virat, who is the cause of everything. So here it says the cause of the power of hearing, the ears, the deity of hearing, and the ability to hear is caused by the great sage's desire to know, just like today is Christmas, right? So as kids, they believe it's Santa. It just happens for no reason other than Santa wants to give them gifts. But that's for foolish children. When there's toys under the trees, it's Why are they there? It's because the kids wanted them and the parents, the guardians, provided them. Similarly, we have ears, karnau. Why are they there? Karnau and then gunagraha, the objects of hearing. Why are the ears and the object of hearing there? Actually, there's two types of sound that's produced. One is the sound, that bounces off an object or someone speaks. That's like the external sound. And then there's an internal sound, the sound that's in our head or in our intelligence or even more deeper than that, which is going to be the focus and much of the class that we're going to try and give today. So there's karnau, gunagraha, the ears and the object that the ear is hearing, and then the shrotam, which is the ability to hear, and the disha, the god of the air that is controlling what we hear. So all of these things are interdependent, and they're there for a purpose. The purpose they were manifested is because of the desire of the great sages, the rishis, to hear. Rishi means a seer. So because the rishis were interested in Vedic knowledge and nothing more, that is the real purpose of hearing, and therefore it's been provided for us. Unfortunately, hearing is being misled, just like Srila Prabhupada is pointing out in the purport, that we're eager to hear all kinds of sound vibrations from the radio or the television, and big puffed up scientists are hearing about all these things about planets that are way beyond their ability to ever visit themselves, but they believe it. So they're eager to hear all of these things, but not Vedic knowledge. So the ears are given for a purpose, but unfortunately, we're not using it for the right purpose in this material world. It's just like the father may give a child a book, ABCs. This is how you learn your ABCs. So that's obviously the intention of the father was for the child to be uplifted, to learn something, to prepare himself for greater things in life. However, if the child, he has free will, so he can rip out the pages or fill them full of crayons or hit his brother over the head with it, that's not what it's meant for, even though it's provided. So here we have Krishna explaining to Uddhava the essence of Vedic knowledge. In the 11th canto, right now we're on chapter 24, I believe, in the 11th canto in our study on Sundays. But we went over this chapter probably about 2 years ago, maybe a year ago. And this is a very interesting section because just prior to the 12th chapter of Canto 11, Krishna is explaining all the different Vedic paths, which are multiple. Jnana, yoga, all kinds of rituals. It's unlimited. All the different paths one can practice in order to reach the absolute truth, according to the proclivities and the advancement of the spirit soul. So Uddhava became very confused, and he asked the Lord, please tell me summarize and tell me what I should do, because it was quite confusing. So Krishna then spoke this verse 17, which is quite esoteric and difficult to understand, but which is illumined through the purport of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So the verse is, in answer to Uddhava's question, what is the essence of the path of self-realization? So the answer is, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, my dear Uddhava, the Supreme Lord gives life to every living being and is situated within the heart along with the life air. This is very important. Situated in the heart with the life air and the primal sound vibration. So the life air is prana, and it's impregnated with the primal sound vibration, which is the Omkara, and is also referred to nada. Nada is Vedic sound. So the Lord can be perceived in his subtle form within the heart by one's mind, since the Lord controls the mind of everyone, even great demigods like Lord Shiva. The Supreme Lord also assumes a gross form of various sounds of the Vedas, composed of short and long vowels and consonants of different intonations. So, to explain this, go to the next slide. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says that this verse is a description of the creation of the material world and how the Lord descends in order to benefit the spirit souls by giving them an opportunity to go back home, back to Godhead. So, the Lord enters as the primal force, which is prana, the living force, impregnated with nada, which is transcendental sound, by entering the Muladhara chakra of Lord Brahma. So mula, of course, that's a common word. Mula means the root. So it's the base chakra of Lord Brahma. The lowest chakra of Lord Brahma, he enters as transcendental sound on the highest level of speech, which is technically called paravak. So if you can just bear with me while I try to explain this to the best of my ability. But as you can see here on the image, there's the chakra of Lord Brahma. And you see how it's got 4 petals with different Sanskrit letters in a geometric form of a square. So the word that was given in the verse was Rishi. Rishi means seer. A seer of Vedic knowledge actually sees sound. Sound has a particular form, a geometric form, and it has a color. So when these geometric forms are given here of a chakra, that actually is what the rishis see in their hearts. So Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, through his expansion as a super soul, in this case Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, enters into the lowest chakra of Lord Brahma in a spiritual form of sound vibration, the Omkara, the Pranava, as Paravak. Okay, so just bear with me. Let's go to the next slide. Then he enters the Manipura chakra of Lord Brahma as Pashantivak. So there's different stages of consciousness, stages of existence. So this stage of existence can be experienced by any living entity because we're part and parcel of the Lord and we're a facsimile of him. So similarly, Lord Brahma, he's got 4 different forms. One of his forms is that of the embodiment of all living beings. And how come I can't remember the name of the Sanskrit? It's a very common name. Anyway, I'll try and remember it later. So so we can experience this same thing in our Karana Deha. Karana means causal, or causal body, on the level of the subconscious, which is just next door to experiencing spirit. It's on the Susupti stage. It's like deep sleep. Then, go to the next slide. Then, through the Manipura chakra, he enters the Vishuddha chakra in what's referred to technically as Madhyamavak. This is the next grosser stage of sound vibration. This can be experienced in the subtle body, which we experience in the dream state. Susupti, that's called the Sukshma Deha. And then this slide, number 10, Then finally, the last stage is called Vaikarivak. This is what comes out of the mouth. It came out of the mouth of Lord Brahma as the gross sounds of the Sanskrit letters in the form of the Vedas. This can be experienced through the gross body, the the Stulha Deha, which is called Jagrata, or the awakened state. So, in the Vedanta Sutra, it describes how Lord Brahma creates this world through sound. He's sitting on the lotus, and then from his mouth, the words of the Vedas appear. And he meditates upon those bijas, these seed mantras, and then he manifests the forms from the sound. And I mentioned this before in the Gopal Tapani Upanishad as well as the Vedanta Sutra. It describes how when Lord Brahma, when he would speak, then fire appeared, and he would then pronounce ka, water would appear, ete, and then the demigods appeared, and then he would say shigram. Shigram is a word that means that which is full of blood. So that he would say shigram, and that then the human beings came, not like the demigods, but the human beings are called shigram, full of blood. So from these different sounds, when he vibrated the sound, then matter took shape. So in the Rig Veda, there's a verse, it says, Vak Vai Brahma. Vak Vai Brahma means that the sound vibration is Brahman himself. The Sanskrit letters, they all convey meanings. They're bijas, seeds, mantras. They're not like ordinary speech nowadays can be completely arbitrary. Just like I'm looking at my desk, my chair, my lamp. So all of those nomenclatures, lamp, chair, desk, there's no relation really to the object. In another language, it could be any other arbitrary sound. But Sanskrit, each one of the vibration is composed of seed vibrations that actually name the object. So therefore, it's a very interesting article that came out in the mid-80s that NASA was working on a secret project to utilize the Sanskrit language because it's the most perfect language that they could find, because nothing was arbitrary. Everything meant something for a reason. It was the most logical of all languages. So they were going to utilize that to develop artificial intelligence to program computers. And it says, according to articles that you can easily look up by Googling it, Sanskrit Artificial Intelligence NASA project, by the hope is that by 2025, they will have developed a sixth generation supercomputer, and by 2034, the seventh generation supercomputer based on Sanskrit in order to produce artificial intelligence. Just to give you some sort of an idea, right now we're on the second level supercomputers, which are just like toys compared to what they're hoping to produce. So whether that happens or not, that doesn't really matter. For our purposes, we understand Sanskrit is called Artha Ashraya. Artha Ashraya means the shelter of meaning. Sanskrit letters are called aksharas. There are 50 alphabets or categories of sound, short and long vowels and consonants of different intonations, beginning with a and ending in ksha. So you put up and kshara together, it becomes akshara, which means infallible. It also refers to the supreme. So akshara is synonymous with pranava, or the omkara. From the combination of A, U, M, and the bindu, you have the expansion of all the other letters, the bijas of the Sanskrit alphabet, and from there, everything is constructed. These are the building blocks of the material world, not the periodic table. That's an after effect. The real cause is the bija mantras. The bijas can create effects. There's vibration, it's sound vibration, and that causes matter to form. So here's the next slide. There's a science which is called cymatics. This comes from a Greek word. Cymac is a wave. So it's the science of studying how vibration, or waves, energy in other words, causes matter to take shape. And in the 1960s and 70s, there is a Swiss scientist by the name of Hans Jenny, and he developed an oscillator which would generate a frequency. We've seen this before. Hanuman Prashek Swami gave us a link to some YouTubes. It's not difficult to find, where the oscillator, when you have a certain type of vibration, sound vibration, that's programmed in with the vibration, it'll either move water, sand, dust, liquid plastic, or milk. Isn't that interesting? And it'll show you what the vibration, what kind of geometric form it'll produce. So here in this slide, you can see here's the Sri Yantra Mandala, which is the Omkara. And then when a human voice is put through this oscillator, this is the form you get. So that's why this cymatics is a study of how sound vibration creates form. So here's the next slide. So I'm going to attempt to try and explain how the different levels of sound work, beginning from the jiva. So the jiva, in his pure state, actually, just like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha. It's the material nature, the three modes of material nature that are acting, and we do nothing. The jiva soul actually is completely transcendental, and he's just observing and being absorbed in this material world. And because of his attachment, we think so many things are going on because of our doing when it has nothing to do with us. So the jiva, all he can do is desire. So he desires, and this is what's called the highest level of speech or of sound. It's a pure vibration of the soul. That's called paravak. It comes from the depths of the soul, and the soul, because we're part and parcel of Krishna, we want to enjoy. We're just like him. Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. So being his part and parcel, we have that inherent quality. So this little tiny spirit soul is just like screaming out, I want to enjoy, I want to enjoy. And if we misuse our independence and we want to enjoy something material, then when the soul vibrates that subtle sound that he desires to enjoy, it agitates the buddhi, it agitates the intelligence, and it gives an idea of what we want to enjoy. Just like if we want to be rich and famous and powerful, then the intelligence is there presenting us with this idea, and we start to get a desire for it, and it becomes, when the desire becomes more concrete, then it turns from the paravak to pashanti. Pashanti means to see. So pashanti vak is on the level of the intelligence. So when the sound can be visualized within the intelligence, then we start to think about, if we want to be rich and famous and all that, then we start thinking about, oh, we need a big car and a house and all kinds of respect from people, etc., etc. From Pashanti Vak, then it goes to the mind. On the mental activity will give us the ability to start planning how we can attain this thing that we want, that we desire. That's called sound on the level of Madhyama Vak. Now it's getting on a grosser level. It's where we can elaborate and plan things. Like, for instance, if we want to be rich and famous, we have to think about how we're going to invest the money and what kind of friends we're going to need and how we're going to corner the market, all that kind of stuff. The mind has two functions, kalpa and sankalpa, accepting things that we think that are going to promote our plans, and then rejecting things that are unfavorable. So we hear this kind of speech all the time within our mind, and you can observe it in children and in elderly people that are starting to become senile. We start babbling all the time. That's because there's talk going on all the time inside of our mind, and just with elderly people with senility or children, it comes out of their mouth. But actually it's happening all the time. There's sounds going on in our head, and that comes from Madhyama Vak. Then the last stage, gross sound, that's called Vaikari Vak. That's when we start to speak to other people. We tell other people what we've been thinking about, what we desire to do, how we're going to achieve our goals. So that can be heard externally. That's gross sound. So we'll go to the next slide. So by these different levels of sound, it creates certain types of energy, just like the most gross sound, Vaikari Vak. This is the created potency that's invested within Vaikari Vak. Therefore, it's Kriya Shakti. Just like Srila Prabhupada gave the example, one time he was walking, I believe, in New York, and he asked devotees, he pointed to the skyscraper they had just passed. He said, what is the origin of this skyscraper? And the devotees had different things that they were thinking, was somebody started drawing plans, or they started bringing all kinds of materials, or, started getting finances for it, etc., etc. And then Prabhupada said, no, the skyscraper is there because someone started speaking about it. Speech is invested with energy. And you can think about it. This is pretty easy to understand. Just like if you really want to get somebody to do something, you just scream at them, you just yell at them, go do this and that. Or, anybody who's married, I'm sure you had the experience, when your wife is telling you something, like, I don't know, the grass needs to be cut, or the faucet is leaky, then the man goes and does it, even though the wife is thinking that, I'm not complaining, I'm just, I'm worried, or I'm just telling you what's on my mind. So from their standpoint, they're not complaining, but from the husband's standpoint, they're thinking, oh, they're complaining, I got to go do something. They immediately invested with energy. So neither the husband nor the wife understands that, but the speech, it creates Kriya Shakti. And this Kriya Shakti is a perversion of the energy in the spiritual world, which is called Hladini Shakti, or the pleasure-giving potency of the Lord. In the spirit souls, we experience that as Ananda. Here's the next slide. So the next stage, a subtler stage, is the Madhyama Vak, the speech within our head. That's a Jnana Shakti, or the knowledge, the energy of knowledge. So all these kind of things like self-help books and how to achieve our goals, The Secret, etc., this is all the same Jnana Shakti on the Madhyama Vak platform. And originally, this is a spiritual energy of samvit potency in the spiritual world, and that which the spirit soul experiences as chit. The next slide. And then if we go back a little bit further, on the on the platform of images or ideas. That's Pashantivak. This is infused with the energy of Icha Shakti, which is the desire energy. This means willpower. It's the energy of the subtle body to set goals and desires. This is in the Manipura chakra, which vibrates just above the navel. So it's interesting how people naturally, they say they have a gut feeling. That's because that's where the chakra, desire, that's where it comes from. And this Icha Shakti on the platform of intelligence will be very important with what we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So this originally is the spiritual energy, which is the Sandini potency, or also it's referred to as Bala. Now Bala, of course, is the manifestation of Lord Balaram, the original spiritual master. So when we get Bala, this kind of strength is spiritual strength. So this is a spiritual strength, but in the material world, it turns into the Icha Shakti in Pashantiva, and it's experienced by the spirit soul as Sat, eternity. Okay, and then the last slide in this series, and the energy of the soul is called Paravak, the vibration of the soul, and this is Bhava, our original energy of pure love of Godhead. So here, now this next slide, now we can consider how these levels of sound also correspond to different levels of consciousness. So the Vaikarivak, the gross sound, we can hear it, we can relate to it in the Jagrata, the waking stage of consciousness. On the mental sphere, that's the Madhyamavak, that's mental sound, that's the dreaming state, which is called Svapna. Then the idea or the image stage is Pashantivak, that's deep sleep or Susupti. And then on the realm of the soul, that consciousness is Turiya, that's Paravak, or it's transcendental sound. Here's another slide. We can look at it also how the different levels of sound can be experienced through different bodies. So the gross sound is experienced through our Vaikarivak is experienced through our Stula Deha, our gross body. The Madhyamavak is experienced through our mental or our subtle body, Shukshma Deha. The Pashantivak, where we can see images and ideas, that's experienced on the causal body or the Karana Deha. And then the Paravak, transcendental sound, that can be experienced only in our transcendental spiritual body, which is the Siddha Deha. Okay? Now, there's this verse, this example that's given in the 11th canto, the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is 11, 10, 12. There's the example that, just one second. Got to make sure I'm not getting off here. Intermission, sorry. Yes, here we go. So it talks about different levels of sound by hearing the Vedic mantras and how we can elevate ourselves through Vedic knowledge. So it's the method for doing this is by hearing the Vedic sounds through the lips of the spiritual master. The disciple hears without offense, and the spiritual master infuses the disciple with Vedic knowledge by his instructions. So the example is that the guru is the basis. He's the bottom piece of wood. Aruni wood is type of wood that's meant specifically for Vedic sacrifice. It's sacred wood. So the guru is the base Aruni wood, and the disciple is like the kindling stick. And the instructions coming from the spiritual master is just like the kindling, the Aruni kindling, and by the disciple, ardent effort, all these three produce the fire of knowledge. And when the fire of knowledge is produced, then all of them are happy. It's described. So when we make a fire, not through a lighter or turning on the stove, but when you actually use a stick, which is pictured here, it's a lot of hard work. You have to really, really work and sweat in order to produce enough friction for the fire to ignite. And while you're doing that, working really very, very hard, it's difficult. It's difficult work in the beginning. This is what it stated in the Bhagavad Gita when Krishna says that the mode of goodness is a difficult proposal because it's like poison in the beginning, but nectar in the end. So we have to go through all of the trials and tribulations of spiritual life, which means it's not easy to get started. It's not easy to follow all the regulative principles, rising early, making sure that we avoid any kind of contact with sinful activities, chanting our rounds without offenses, going out and preaching to others that may not be at all interested in Krishna consciousness and being subjected to all kinds of abuses and rejection. All of these things are very difficult. But if we work hard, then we'll get the result. But the first thing that happens when you're trying to make a fire is smoke comes out. And it burns your eyes, it's uncomfortable, etc. So when we first start spiritual life, the practices of sadhana bhakti may not always be very pleasant. It's hard to control the mind. It's hard to get along with other devotees. It's hard to execute the orders of the spiritual master. But if we diligently work towards it, we'll get the result. There'll be a spark, and then eventually there'll be fire. So this is the analogy that's given in the 11th canto, and then we'll go to the next slide. There's different levels of hearing and chanting Vedic knowledge, or chanting specifically for us by the grace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu of the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. So here's, this is my last slide, I believe, isn't it? Yeah, this is my last slide. So I'll spend just a little bit of time on this. Starting from the lowest level of sound, it's called Vaikari Vak, or that which comes out of our mouth. When we first start chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, or preaching and speaking to others, it's what can be called lip service. It comes from the tongue and the lips, but is there anything really behind it? Or do we really have any potency? We have to begin somewhere, so it begins with the grossest form of sound, Vaikari Vak, which is simply the vibration of the tongue in contact with the air. So by practice of transcendental sound, chanting the transcendental sounds on this level of sound, we can get up to the stage of anartha nivritti. Why? Because this is considered nam aparad. We're not chanting the pure name. We're creating all kinds of offenses. As I said, it's just like lip service. In the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Purushottama Yoga, it describes about the banyan tree, and then Krishna explains that the spirit soul is going through all these different branches of the banyan tree, utilizing a subtle body, going all over the universe, and he's being carried just like the aroma is carried by the air. Similarly, our desires are carrying us all over this world. So when we chant on this level, then Krishna can perceive the scent, or in other words, the stench of our desires. We can't hide them. Even though maybe other people don't know, but Krishna can see as a super soul the level of our desires. So we have to rise above this. If once we go to the next stage, which is called the Madhyama Vak, Then we're on mental sound. In other words, we're engaging our minds so that we're actually hearing what we're chanting. And if we come to this stage, that's namavas. Now that's on the stage of liberation. And we can get up to the stage of nishta through this type of chanting. After that, by ardent and regular chanting in this stage, we come to the next stage, which is called pashantiva. This is on the level of intelligence. And from this, we'll get nama, ruchi, or ashakti, real taste for the holy name. Now, I mentioned just a little previously that this is an important stage because it's on the stage of desire. When we have mental sound, we still have desires within our hearts. We're trying, we're paying attention, and we're becoming quickly purified. But still the desires for sense gratification are there in the heart, and they're always coming to the mind. But when we chant on the stage of pashantivak, when we can actually start to see the form of the holy name, then we attain ruchi and ashakti, until finally we become purified from all anartas, and we come to the transcendental stage, the highest stage of sound, which is pure sound, that the soul vibrates, and that's bhava. And that can be experienced by the practice of sadhana, going through these different stages. So in order to go from the anarta nivritti stage to nista, to ruchi, through vikarivak, madhyamavak, pashantivak, then finally paravak, there's only two things that are needed. One is that we pronounce the Hare Krishna mantra or Vedic sounds properly. Just like people of the Western world are referred to as mlecha. Mlecha comes from a verbal root, mlech, which means to talk nonsensically. In other words, to not be able to properly chant the Vedic sounds. So mlecha is those who are not cultured people. They don't know how to chant properly. So the first thing we need to do is to chant the Hare Krishna mantra distinctly. And then the other thing is to avoid offenses. Offenses to devotees, offenses against the holy name. And chief of those offenses is to not pay attention. So if we continue to chant simply with Vikarivak, just with the lips and the tongue, then it's very difficult to make advancement. It'll take a long, long time. But when we start to chant with our minds in Madhyamavak, then we'll start to avoid the offenses, and we can make further and further progress. Of course, this is very, very difficult. An example is given that if you take, there's a particular type of medicine you can make in Ayurveda. It's called Kajini Karan, and it's made with mercury and sulfur. So you know mercury, how it just goes all over the place, and you add sulfur to it, it's just going to, you can't like get a handle on it. It rolls all over the place. So, but there's a process where you put a mortar and pestle and you start grinding and grinding and grinding, and then you do these some sort of different processes, and you chant certain mantras. And after grinding and grinding like this, it'll actually coagulate, it'll amalgamate, and it'll become one substance. And then it turns into a very powerful medicine, which is called Makandavaja. I don't know what that is. I've heard of it, but anyway, the point is that just like our mind, just like the mercury goes all over the place, it's difficult to control it. But through a certain process, and by doing it over and over and over and over again, then eventually it'll amalgamate, and we'll come to the next higher stage, Madhyamavak, Pashantivak, and then eventually Paravak. So that's the end of my presentation. I did try and keep it to the right amount of time without bringing up too many points. I hope that worked. I'm going to unmute everybody and ask if anybody would like to add anything or they need clarification.
Ram, a couple of questions. Very nice class. What do you mean by meditating on the form of the holy name? And then I had the question, then I forgot it. Something that one of the very last things you said that the great offense of meditating inattentively, and then you said something like we have to chant with the mind. I don't remember exactly what it was you said, but those were sort of my two questions. What do you mean by meditating on the form of the Lord and chanting in the mind?
All right. Well, the holy name is the Lord, and that is his form. It's a transcendental form, the sound. So when we're meditating on the sound, we're actually meditating on the Lord himself. It's non-different.
Okay. That's what I thought you may have meant, meditating on the form of Krishna, little blue cowherd boy, and of course that Mahamantra includes Balaram or Radhika Ramana and Radharani as well.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Okay.
Okay, and then could you restate the last question you had?
And I didn't state it well because I forgot. I kind of forgot the question, but you just said it. It just dropped out of my mind. Something about chanting. What you said preceded it was that you were saying that what really slows us down was not chanting attentively, and then I think you said chanting in the mind or something like that.
All right. Okay. Maybe I'm just making it too complicated. When we're chanting on the level of Vaikari simply means the sound that comes out of our mouth that you can hear. There's other sounds, like there's mental sounds that are definitely there. It's in our brain, it's in our mind. We just can't hear them. We can hear our own mental sounds, but we can't hear other people's mental sounds. It's not distinct. Yogis can hear other people's mental sounds. That's why they can read other people's minds, because they can hear the sound of their mind. So when we chant the Hare Krishna mantra, if we're not paying attention, then we're chanting simply with the lips and the tongue. So the sound is coming out of our mouth by karivak, but the benefit is really limited. When we go to the next stage and we actually hear the sound in our mind, that's called Madhyama Vak, and that'll give us nishta. When we start to actually pay attention to hear the sound of the Hare Krishna in our mind, just not what's coming, just letting it come in out of our mouth and we're thinking of something else. Because we're like listening in our head to something else, but the sound is coming out. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, and we're thinking about something else. So when we start to think about Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, when we actually start to engage our mind in that, then that's the next stage. That's what I was trying to say. I just maybe made it too complicated.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, this is Balabhadra.
Hare Krishna, Balabhadra Prabhu.
Very nice class. I just wanted to add something here real briefly to everything that you're saying, because you spent so much wonderful time on this, discussing the importance of chanting, that we know that Srila Prabhupada and the Chaitanya Charitamrita explains that chanting is the watering process in our devotional life. At the same time, because you're talking about the mind and focusing the mind on our chanting, Chaitanya Charitamrita says Sekajalapanya, Upashaka, and Badiyaya. And in other words, because we're praying to Krishna, asking him for the benediction of engaging in this devotional service, that if our minds are focused on some standard of sense gratification, then the watering process is going to nourish that material desire rather than our devotional desire. Just thought I'd throw that out there.
Mm-hmm. There was a seminar that I heard, and it was referring to, I think, Jiva Goswami's analysis, how if we continue to make offenses and we don't try and root them out, it causes all kinds of undesirable effects. And one of them is just like you're describing, that it waters the seeds of material desires. Because we're not becoming advanced in spiritual life fast enough, we start to lose faith, and then actually we can become like completely lose our faith. Because we try the process, it doesn't work, and then we completely give it up. That's possible through offenses. The other is that we want to enjoy the benefits of spiritual life. Instead of trying to advance spiritually, we start to like, how people give us respect, or we get some sort of material facilities. It starts to increase our material desires instead of making them disappear. And then another one was that we start to see, even though we're not advanced, we start to see ourselves as advanced, and therefore we try and promote ourselves as being big devotees, because we want respect. So we start to point out, well, I did this, and I did that, and I'm the cause of this and that. So all those are from offenses to the holy name.
And yet, at the same time, it's a wonder how, although we're committing offenses to the, I can only speak for myself, of course, committing offenses to the holy name, if that's the level of consciousness that we're at, it's amazing how the cure is to somehow or other keep chanting. And so one can't help but wonder, how am I going to maintain my interest in chanting if I'm to keep committing offenses? Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think that if one becomes too offensive, he will just not be able to chant. But if one, even if he's offensive, he continues to chant, then by that very act, it shows that there's commitment there, and therefore he'll be able to eventually get rid of that, the aparadhs that he's making.
It's understood we're in the anartha nivritti stage, so it's almost to be understood that we're making offenses because we're neophytes. But as you're saying, Ram, by that continuation of the process, gradually we give up those anarthas. They gradually become less and less. Just like when a child learns how to walk, it's understood he's going to trip, he's going to fall, he's going to skin his knee. All these things will happen. But if he continues earnestly endeavoring, eventually he'll walk perfectly. So yeah, it may seem like we'll never give up those offenses, but if we follow this process and everything else involved in the process, hearing, not just chanting, but hearing and associating with devotees and living in the holy place and taking prasad, the whole process together, eventually our offenses will become reduced, and one day they'll cease.
Ramananda, can you mute, please? Yeah. I think it's a Chitananda.
On that point also, I'm trying to remember if I read it or if I heard it in the discussion or a lecture, but Srila Prabhupada saying that there were two, what is that noise? What is that noise back there?
I got it. That's Chitananda Prabhu.
Srila Prabhupada was saying that there are two types of offense-less chanting. There's one type, actually I think it's in the Nectar of Devotion. One type is where a person is committing offenses, but he's not aware the fact that he's committing offenses whilst chanting, and this side of the example of a Jamil, of course, in that instance. And the other type is when a person is consciously trying to avoid committing offenses. And of the two, the conscious efforts to avoid it is superior.
Nice.
You know, I never heard before one of the things you said, Ramananda Prabhu, about the yogi can hear our thoughts. That was scary. You know, God forbid people can hear our thoughts. But then as I was thinking about that, thinking about maybe just commenting on that, I was thinking, but Krishna can hear our every thought. It really kind of makes us want to, as much as possible, control our mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, this is Jai Jagadish Das. Thank you so much for a wonderful class and all the preparation you put into it. I had an experience of just what you were talking about, Narayana Prabhu, with Srila Prabhupada. And when Srila Prabhupada came to London, it would have been August of 1971, and I had been in the temple, I guess, starting in February, so I was initiated by then. Anyway, one morning, perhaps mid-morning, 9, 10 o'clock, so there were perhaps a half a dozen of us just chanting japa in the temple in London. It was on Bury Place. Srila Prabhupada came in and we offered our respects, and Prabhupada came up very close to the deities. And I was quite close to Srila Prabhupada, and I asked him something on the order of, Srila Prabhupada, do you like the way that Sri Krishna is dressed? And he said, yes. And then I thought in my mind, and this is a very, very clear recollection, I thought in my mind, and Srila Prabhupada, how about Srimati Radharani? And he looked at me and he said, yes, Srimati Radharani is also very beautiful.
Wow.
Wow, isn't that something?
That's a great recollection. Boy, that's nectar. Wow. Good comment.
I sure hope you document that someplace.
Yeah, that's something you definitely want to share with the devotees. That's a great one.
Yeah, thanks for the encouragement. Yeah, amazing experience, yeah.
Also a little scary.
Okay, Prabhus, thank you very much for
Ramananda?
tolerating. Yes.
I just wanted to, I can't see the slides, but you were showing slides and you said, and this is what the human voice looks like when it's formed. And I was wondering, you said when there's a slideshow, you put it on YouTube. You still do that? Are you going to do it with this one?
Yeah. Sure.
And can you tell me what that picture looks like?
Yeah, there's this Swiss scientist. You can look it up on the internet. His name's Hans Jenny. And just if you type in cymatics, there'll be a whole bunch of stuff that'll come up. And look for cymatics and Omkara, and you'll see that he did an experiment where he invited some expert in chanting Vedic mantras, and he chanted the Omkara, then it produced the Sri Yantra.
And so the YouTube link to your class is on the eSangha website.
No, whenever somebody does a PowerPoint like I did, I always make a YouTube of it, so that way you can get all the references. You'll see the same thing later on in the recording, so you get all the slides.
Okay, thank you. It was a very good class.
Thank you. And thank you, Prabhus, for listening. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Oh, by the way, tomorrow is the last class that Hanuman Prashek Swami is going to give her sometime before he goes traveling, so please attend.
Indeed.
Thank you, Prabhus.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Prabhupada.
Haribol.